Sure.
and running again.
You want to make sure you catch up with all your, you get your 10 hours in.
You know, I
Or
think
100 hours, really.
if it's all right, I think to maximize time, and there'll still be some folks coming in, but I think it's nice to know who's in the room and what you do and where you are, because we had a representation from nearly across the country the last hour. So it'll be interesting to see what this room, who all you are and what you're doing for the church. So would you mind by just tell me who you are, what church, what you pastor, lay person, what conference, so we kind of know. Would you start us? Okay.
Yeah.
Michigan, all right. Both of you?
Yes.
All right. Detroit, Friends, UMC.
Yeah.
Both of you there? Laypersons, pastors? Cool. All right.
Kathy Hall, I'm a layperson. I work for the Arkansas Conference.
Very good.
Tom Meyer, Susquehanna Conference. I'm a lay person of the northeast part of the state.
Great. What do you do, Kathy? What do you do?
Well, we've got some new leadership, so
Okay.
that's kind of in flux right now. I've been the lay program coordinator for the last
Okay.
7 years,
All right.
so.
Should have asked that when you, thank you. Thank you very much. Sir?
George Johnson, Susquehanna Conference, Warriors Mark, United Methodist Church, Missions.
Layperson doing missions.
Yes.
Cool. Sir?
Dave Schultz, pastor church about 45 minutes south of here.
All right, very good.
Ken McGinnis, part of the lady at Winterstown Church.
Excellent, good.
Sherry Barth, laity, Westdale United Methodist Church, and Susquehanna Conference.
Bob Holliday, pastor in the desert southwest in Phoenix.
Cool, we're starting to spread out. Very
No, it's
good.
not cool.
I'm Cindy Theobald. I'm from the East Ohio Conference.
East Ohio, and you,
Hello.
I'm sorry, what?
Cindy Theobald,
Pastor?
pastor.
Okay, yep.
Spear, pastor, Eastern Pennsylvania.
He's our resident second teacher. This is number 3 for him. Something is wrong here, clearly, I don't know, but I don't know. I'm either doing very poorly or he's gonna teach after I'm done or something, anyway.
I'm Patty Agnew. I'm clergy in the Mountain Sky area. I live in Montana.
Excellent. Wow, nice, good. Sir?
Andy Irvin, Susquehanna Conference, Gardeners, just to the southwest.
Okay,
Frank Miller, Susquehanna Conference, Zion East Prospect.
both clergy? Okay.
Andrew Bird Harris, I'm a pastor here in the Susquehanna Conference with 2 churches.
2 churches, all right.
Charles May, clergy, Mount Lake Park Bethel, and I'm West Virginia Conference.
West Virginia, cool.
Julia Burgess, clergy, Point Charge, West Virginia Conference.
West Virginia, got some West Virginia folks, good.
Sue Shuey, Harrisburg, layperson.
All right.
Liz Long, Susquehanna Conference, a layperson.
Church here in where?
Right outside of Stilson.
Okay. Did I get everybody? No.
Karen, East Ohio Conference, clergy.
Local church?
Yes.
Okay.
Local church.
All right. Very good. I think we have everybody. All right. Excellent. One more person coming. You get to introduce yourself. Where are you? A pastor, lay person? What conference?
I work for the North Texas Conference with New Church Starts and Church Vitality.
Excellent. Come on in, ladies.
From West Virginia.
You're from West Virginia as well. You've already been partially introduced. All right, that's good. We have the West Virginia contingent here. All right. So tell us where in West Virginia, ladies, who you are and where in West Virginia.
My name's Annette Carver. I'm a pastor and I live in the northern panhandle,
Okay.
just south of Wheeling in Moundsville.
Okay, all right.
And I'm Claudia Thomas, and I'm CLM, and I live in New Haven, West Virginia, right on the Ohio River.
Okay, all right, very good. Well, listen, thank you very much. Looking forward to being, I must tell you, when they asked me about small churches, I thought, I've served some, and I'm certainly familiar with a lot of small churches and all the conferences. How would I approach talking about MissionInsite specifically for small churches? And I struggle a little bit with that because I think somehow the assumption is in some ways the capacity isn't the same. I'm not sure that's correct, and I'm not going to assume that, frankly. I'm going to show you, I think, the basics of things you can do, but I want to show you some of the other things you can do as well, because I'm not going to assume You can't do the things that anybody can do. All right, that fair enough? I mean, but I am going to understand that small churches have some unique challenges. How many of you are in rural areas? I'm curious. Okay, it's not everybody, so you've got kind of a mixture. All right, so I'm Chuck Salter, and I am a clergy member of the Florida Conference. I grew up in the Midwest. I served 2-point charges in my early ministry. I was at a town of 250 people, you know, with probably 350 dogs in the town, you know. You've been places like that. So I was in Illinois, which was a lot of small towns, and so I've been there. I've been on the conference staff of Central Illinois, that's now Illinois Great Rivers, at a church plant in Florida. And for the past probably 15, 20 years, 20 plus years, through a series of events, I've been in the world of trying to assist both conferences and local churches in understanding their neighbors. When I was on the conference staff, it was a challenge to understand where to do new things and where to do collaborative things, and we didn't have any technology to do this sort of thing. So we've come a long way, and so let's talk a little bit about MissionInsite and and I had a little trouble first hour, so let's hope this doesn't continue with this mouse. So here's what happens when people talk about demographics. They say, I've done my demographics. And that usually translates to some kind of a radius around something, and they've done a report. And generally speaking, churches believe bigger is better. That's exactly the opposite of true. And we'll talk a little bit about how you determine your ministry area, because frankly, that's kind of a key question for any size church. What is your ministry area, or what are your ministry areas? So the reality is there is no single report from any vendor. I don't care how wonderful they are, and we think we're wonderful. But there's no vendor that tells the entire story of a geography, or no report. Why? Because even in rural areas, one side of the county may look different from another. Certainly in neighborhoods, they are clearly different from each other if you're in a suburban or an urban setting. And churches, regardless of conference, are very different from one another, even if they're small. There are some differences, as you well know. So we think, at least in strategy, that the starting point for using our tools is understanding the identity of your congregation. Now, that normally is by plotting people. I'm going to address that later, okay? I'm going to not address that right up front, because it's a step that I thought, well, let's just talk about that, but let's talk about it after we discuss kind of general demographic information reports, what's available. So I'm going to leave that for future part of our time together, but it really is answering the question, what is unique about our congregation? What is the reach of our church? Where do our people come from? And what is the financial reality we face? And that's all pretty important. So that's by uploading people and plotting them. The second question is, who is our neighbor? It's the more traditional way people approach demographics. It's not just census data. It's 4 or 5 different sources. We're going to talk about those and where they come from. And it's trying to understand, when you ask those questions, if we've learned the unique characteristics of our church and then our neighborhood, and we fuse together what it is we've learned in answering those questions, that's sort of the third step in the view of your environment, and it moves to solutions. We call it Fusion View, and that's the place where you think more clearly about leadership and budget concerns and ministry initiatives and all of those pieces. So anyway, we'll talk a little bit more about that. That's typically the comparative insight report that we use. So it's a listening process. It's learning about who your neighbor is or your neighbors are. It's really forming leadership based upon what you've learned. And it's a process of doing this on a more regular basis. You won't be surprised that we've had churches call us and say, we've done our demographics. We did a report 2 years ago. It was a 10-mile radius. Is it still good? No, because the world has changed in 2 years, even in rural areas. There's a tremendous amount of diversity today. In fact, we're going to talk a little bit about that later. Welcome. And there are 71 unique household types in America. Can you imagine? So we'll talk a little bit about what we can learn about that. And this is an ongoing process. You may have questions about children's ministry. You may have questions about adult ministry. Here's one of the things I know. When you ask churches of any size what they believe their future to be, 7 out of 10 say families with young children. It's like somebody wrote that on their forehead or something, right? Well, what happens if they don't live there? What happens if your community looks different than that? What if they are singles? What if they are highly racially diverse? What if you have people who are moving into retirement or are retired? Clearly then, your ministry focus has to change based upon what's true in the environment. So what we hope happens as a result of at least being exposed to MissionInsite today is that you believe this information that's provided is more than numbers, that it represents hearts and minds of people and it's a core asset. How is it that you know about engaging the community around you if you don't know? Are there single parents? How many single parents? What are the ages of the people around you? What are there unique language speaking folks in your area? What is true? How do you know how to engage them if you don't know that? Secondly, using big data, which people hate that word, big data produces faster missional results with more capacity. So that if you've learned certain things are true about your environment and you begin to do ministry that is contextually relevant and sensitive to what's going on, then you're going to have better results. They're going to happen more quickly, potentially. And so that's what we hope this provides for you. And finally, and this is the key, really, so you look at your area, even if it's rural, and you find out that 35% of the households around you are single mothers. Your church doesn't have anybody that knows specifically about single parenting, but how would you address that question? What kind of leadership needs to be in place if you're thinking about that kind of ministry? Is there a budget dollar amount that you might need as you're thinking about your future? If ministry focus doesn't impact leadership and budget, something's wrong. It's got to change, doesn't it? If we keep doing the same things the same way, what results do we get? Same thing. It's not going to be changing. So, all right. I want to talk a little bit about information. I know this is not too exciting, but it's important. Here's why it's important. It's probably not true in your church, but at least my experience has been, if someone learns something about their community they don't know, or maybe they don't like much, the first thing they do is say, that can't be right. No. I've lived here 40 years, and I pretty much know this community, and it doesn't happen in your church, does it ever? Anything like that? Absolutely. And so here's how I respond to that. And I think it's important to know how to respond to that. I appreciate people's perspective of their community. They know more than I do. They live there or they're on the ground. That's true. But you can't know everything. There are things moving too quickly. And here's the bottom line. I know where my information comes from. I can tell you. Where does yours come from? I mean, that's a fair question, isn't it? So that's part of the way of asking, what is it you know? How do you know it? And some of it's windshield stuff where you're going to find, and you need to do that, of course. But there's more to it than that. So the first source of our information is a company called Synergos. That doesn't mean anything to you. They have little clients like Walgreens and Panera Bread and a number of groups like that. There are 3 or 4 companies in America that take the census data and do current year estimate, 5-year projections, 10-year forecasting. Obviously, the 2010 census data is not helpful. In 2019, what can you learn from 2010 census data? Not very much. So, you've got to have current information, updates, estimated population, and some forecasting. Most of the companies that do this pretty well, but Synergos does something unique. They do all the things everybody else does, but what they do is track zip plus 4 changes. Zip plus 4. What is zip plus 4? It's the 3 to 10 households, as part of the last 4 digits in your postal code. In a rural area, it may be a pretty large geography, but if there's additional zip plus 4s, or if there are changes in zip 4s, something's going on. And they confirm mail delivery if zip 4s are being added. And they do that monthly. I don't know of anybody in the country that does anything like that. So Synergos provides quarterly updates to us in terms of core data. MissionInsite, and you're going to laugh maybe about this. It's 3:30, you may not laugh. But twice a year we update information, and the reason we don't do it more frequently is honestly, the church doesn't know what to do sometimes with changing numbers. That's the honest truth. Because I've just ran my report in February, and I've just ran it again in September, and the numbers are all different, and what's going on? What's going on is change. So can you imagine doing that 4 times a year for people that are continually looking at their geography? And we've had some of those issues, so we do it fall and winter, spring and summer. Second source is Experian. You know who they are, one of the credit companies, right? What you may not know is that when you use a credit card, buy a car, pay your utility bill, whatever, they are keeping track of what's happening in your world. They have 300 data points on household. And that allows them to take that information and build a portrait of U.S. households. There are 71 of them. Here's how much drama is going on in America. In 2000, Experian had 40. In 2000, they had 40 household types. In 2010, it went to 71. Can you get your head around what happens when you go from 40 to 71 different types of household? That's huge. And so you'll see some neat names and that kind of thing. And so that's how we understand about the community and also about your congregation, because when you upload your people, we're able to match that address and that household with an Experian mosaic code. And that means we have a sense of a lot of things about what's going on. It's just part of what Walmart does. And I guarantee you it's part of what Amazon does. They know exactly who lives around them and what they do. Why wouldn't we use that for the kingdom? That's the question before us, right? Quadrennium. Quadrennium is a national religious survey that we've done twice. It powers 2 reports and their partner report summaries. Ministry Insight and Religious Insight are the reports that come out of Quadrennium. It's more than 100,000 samples in the survey. Any of you that know statistical sampling know that, Gallup might use 1,200 samples for a national projection. Nothing wrong with that. But if you're going to project information around a local church down to a neighborhood level, you've got to have a lot of samples. What do we do with those samples? There's a white paper about this. I'm not going to take a lot of time. We don't have that much time today. We basically take all of those samples and we distribute them across the country. Obviously, you don't go door to door in every community. Based upon 2 filters. One is the census region. People in the southeast respond to questions differently than people in the northeast, right? And people in the west. And the presence of mosaic groups around your church. When we know what groups are present around your church, we know how those groups were responding in the census region to these questions. So what does that mean? That means the confidence level of these reports for your churches is 80 to 95%, and the margin of error is 2 to 3.5%, unless you happen to be living in Salt Lake City. Why Salt Lake City? Mormons. If you have a very anomalous place, Amana, Iowa, something like that, yeah. Well, no survey like this is going to work at that level. But very directional, very helpful, not a stone tablet, but can really give you a lot of information about your community. And then we have Epsilon, the last source. That is information about consumer interaction, and it literally powers our address lists and the ability to look at rooftop level data on every house on a street. Some annual conferences have what called, they've licensed from us Neighbor Center, And Neighbor Center literally allows you to turn on the houses down the street and click a button on the roof and find out the name of the person who lives there and their age and their income and their Mosaic lifestyle. And here's what happens. Here's what happens when I show that resource. I remember going to the developers meeting about 4 years ago, and we introduced this, and all the developers for the Methodist Church said, "Wow, that is really cool, wow." And 2 seconds later, they went, "Whoa, I don't know, no, that's a little freaky. It's a little freaky, that's a little, that's a little intrusive." This is all public domain data. Let's don't kid ourselves. It's all public domain. You can pretend it's not. The church can pretend it's not. It is. And so either we use this kind of work for the kingdom or we don't, and Amazon will. Guaranteed. Okay? So it's just out there. All right. Man, I'm having trouble with the clicker. All right. We're going to talk about the user assistant window. When you log in, how many of you have logged in and used MissionInsite? Okay. All right, that's good. So you've seen this window. This is the user assistant window. And we created this so people could get solutions to their questions as quickly as possible without having to navigate the entire mapping interface. So we're going to talk about, first of all, demographic reports and the updates that are there. And I'm going to start at kind of basic information because I think that'll be fine in terms of what we're talking about for smaller churches. First of all, you're going to select Generate Demographic Reports, and the first thing you need to answer is what is your ministry area? That's a big question, isn't it? I mean, that's not easily answered sometimes. In fact, you will have more than one ministry area. If you really look carefully, you're going to have more than one ministry area, even if you're in a rural location. Because sometimes you don't go too far and you're in a county seat town. You may have people driving longer distances. You just don't know. So to assume everybody lives in one location is simply not true. So we have the ability for you to select predefined boundaries. What are those? Those are zip codes, they're counties, they're cities. Predefined boundaries, you just decide what you're wanting to look at and you select that, all right? The other option is a radius or polygon. So if you wanted to type in the church address into the system, it'll do a radius of around that church address for you. Or if you want to be creative, you can draw a shape literally on the map. If you happen to be next to a lake or something where your church is, we don't count fish. So you probably want to draw the polygon instead of having a radius out in the lake somewhere, right? We also have travel polygons. That's another step ahead. But I want you to think with me about how you determine your ministry area. Because I really believe this is the question that should be asked first. Because it determines the results of the information you get. First of all, bigger geographies are never better. They're just never better. I know that's counterintuitive, especially if you're in a rural area. It is not true, however, that just going to 10 miles is a way to answer all the questions in a rural area. It's not. It's better to look at 3 miles, 5 miles, and 10 miles than it is to assume 10 miles is the answer. You may even want to look at a county if you're in a rural area and then look inside the county, because there will be places inside a county that are different. And so that's important. Secondly, radius studies, which is what everybody does, and zip code studies, which is what everybody does, are good, but polygons are better. Why? Because you can draw a shape that takes into account your streets, a highway, a natural barrier. You're against a mountain. You got railroad tracks and people don't cross the railroad tracks. I don't know. You know what I'm saying. It is a more precise way of doing your work. I'll tell you what's better yet. What's better yet is travel polygons. If we have time, I'll show you travel polygons. It'll blow your mind. Because drive time is really important. It's really important, especially when people are living a distance. People don't live in perfect circles. Big surprise. or in zip code boundaries only, right? They live where they live. And time really matters. Travel time to work really matters. People often will travel to church at somewhere near the distance that they travel to work. That's not a hard and fast rule, but that is pretty important, I think. So, several people have asked me in these 3 workshops if these PowerPoints will be available. I think so. I got to figure out how to do that, and I don't know. I haven't talked to the conference to see what they want to do, but we'll figure that out. So I know some of you are taking snapshots or notes and that kind of thing. Plotting people. Why does that matter? Because when you plot your people, and not just any people, I'll address that in a minute, it tells the story of your church. If you are a small church, you probably have a sense of where many of your folks come from. I get that, okay? There's a little more to learn than that. You'll sometimes be surprised. There's something surprising about seeing the dots on the map, really where they are, how they relate to one another graphically. Something happens. Don't ask me why, but it does. It tells your story. It talks about then the reach of your church. What do I mean by reach? Well, if your folks come from a county, is your ministry area 400 square miles? Or is it something else? What is the reach of your church? And then, what is the depth of your church? If you know that 40% of your folks come within 2 to 3 miles or 4 miles, whatever it is, and you can see what that geography looks like, that changes how you think about ministry and how you think about reports. So this is critical kind of information. So for the moment, I just want to illustrate a predefined boundary. I'm going to actually look at the little church I'm a part of. Now, I don't know how big your churches are. Mine is about 100 on Sunday-ish, which is not the smallest church ever, but it's not a giant church either. I came out of a church plant that went from 0 to 400 in about 5 years. And I specifically went to a small church with my wife because I wanted to see if I could put into practice some of this stuff that we talk about. And this congregation is in Columbus, Georgia, in an urban center. It literally is landlocked. You know, they built churches in the 60s inside of neighborhoods. And so it looks like that. And there are 400 families with children that can walk to the church in 20 minutes. They didn't know that. That's part of their aha moment. Now they have about 7 of them, children. That give you a sense of it? And the average age is not 35 in the church. What you might think what it might be. It's looks a little like me, unfortunately. So predefined boundary we're going to use in this case. We're going to select not a city, not a county, but a zip code because that's the one most adjacent to where this church is. Now you can select multiple zip codes. I just typed in 31909, you click on it, and when you click on that, then what happens is it appears area to report on 31909. If you want to add 2 more zip codes, you just type the number in, click on it. You can have 3 zip codes if you want. We're going to do 1. Make sense? Everybody with me? All right. And we're going to then move on. Basically what we need to do at that point is click next on the system, and we have to decide, do I want a predefined report or do I want to build my own? I'm trying to keep this as simple as possible, but if you want to build your own report because you have one question for your church, how many families with kids are there, and you don't want to read through 30 pages, you can do that. You just simply click on custom and select the data that you want and generate the report. So you can do that. I'm going to step back from that and talk about our predefined reports, which literally is click a button kind of thing, okay? So we're going to go with predefined reports, and when I select predefined, here's what appears. Executive Insight, Full Insight, Quick Insight. Those are the 3 predefined demographic reports we have. And then down below, the 4 predefined reports we have that are faith-based beliefs, preferences, and practices from Quadrennium. Those are all down below. What we simply did is we took Religious Insight, which is 30 pages, and we know Americans today, and I'm one of them, we want to summarize that. So the priorities report just takes the high points, tells you what the main things are. Same thing with Ministry Insight. There's a companion priorities report. Now, if you want to have everybody in your church run for the hills, what you should do is download a full insight report and print that 35-page sucker and put it on the council. They're not going to engage that. You know they're not, right? They're not going to do that. That's not the way to start. Start with something easy, like a quick insight report. And so basically, here are the three options for you. 11-page quick insight report. I would start there. If your congregation has never done this kind of thing, don't give them the whole load right out of the gate, yes? Maybe later you move to an executive insight report, which I think is our best report, honestly. And the reason it's our best report, you need to hear this. The executive insight report has a section on generations. You need to think about generations. That's really important. And the executive insight report is built around 12 thematic insights, 12 insights we think every church ought to have. I would hope you'll graduate to executive insight. The only reason you need a full insight report is if you decided that you've got a place where you need every piece of data potentially available. I wouldn't go there out of the gate. I just wouldn't. Okay? And when they talk about the two religious survey reports, Ministry Insight, the parts of Ministry Insight are life concerns. What would you use? Let me ask you a question. If you knew the people's life concerns around your church and your ministry area, how would that impact your church? Would it?
Yes, just tell you what to preach on.
What to preach on? What else? What else? What else? What else in terms of life concern? What would you do? What? Missions. What are the things that are driving people, right? And then if you knew why people weren't coming to church and why people in the church were leaving, that might help you think about how you might reposition yourself. And then program or ministry preferences help you really get focused on what is important and what's not. And then information sources and social media, wow. And then the religious insight, beliefs about God, beliefs about Jesus, social and moral values, gives you the climate of the community, religious preferences. But here's the thing, denominational affiliations. If you knew that 7% of the people in your ministry area said they were already affiliated with the United Methodist Church, and you knew the numbers, wouldn't that be an opportunity? If we could just get the 7%, right? Yeah? If you knew that 50% didn't go to church anywhere, wouldn't that be important? So we're going to select the Quick Insight report, I believe. No, yeah, Quick Insight and Ministry Insight priorities. I want to show these to you. And we're just going through that. It's really click the buttons and follow the instructions. Okay. I think I'm going to not cover this, but I need to say this to you. I put it in, I took it out, I put it in, I took it out. One of the things that happens is when you select a report from us, if your computer has a pop-up blocker on, they will not generate. You with me? Do you all know what I mean when I say pop-up blocker? Yes? Okay. They come from the factory with a pop-up blocker usually on in the browsers. That means you don't ever get a report. You keep figuring, you can't find it. I decided I'd have it in here. It's late in the afternoon. There's a couple of steps. There are all kinds of browsers. How many of you use Chrome? How many of you use Chrome? I'll tell you that, just FYI, if you want to have good luck, regardless of your platform, you'll find Firefox and Chrome run the best, generally speaking, on our website. And generally speaking, they run the best, period. Safari also works, not as well as either of those two. And if you've got a Mac and they're great computers, I would run Chrome on Mac. If you try to use the Microsoft product, good luck. Their browser crashes a lot. All I got. I mean, I'm not trying to be a commercial for anybody. It just is what it is. So Chrome, basically, you click those little 3 dots, and what you're going to do is check the settings in Chrome. And after you check the settings, it opens another window. I'm sorry I'm doing this now, but I'm going to do it anyway, just so you know it's not that hard. And basically, you go to the advanced menu. I'm going to put this in one big long list, and I think maybe I'm going to create a handout. And then you're going to say, I need the site settings. I want to know what websites can display. You're going to click the little button over there, and when you do that, it opens a window that says pop-ups and redirects allowed or not. And if it says allowed, you're all set. If it says not allowed, you got to change it. And so you're going to click on this little arrow, and here's where you change it. And so basically this is it. Select the 3 dots, go to settings, advanced menu, site settings, pop-ups and redirects, and then turn the pop-up. I know that's a lot of steps.
Or just find a teenager.
Or find a teenager. But you need to know, I mean, if you don't know how to do that, somebody can help you. We'll help you, but we don't know all the browsers, okay? All right, quick insight report. Really easy to understand the story of an area. Is population in this little zip code growing? Yes, it is. It's green. School age change, significant increase. You get the idea. It's pretty visually powerful. You can look at the numbers. If you're a number person, you can look at the graphs if you're very visual. You can quickly see what's going on. This zip code is growing by 19.3%. So right away, you've kind of learned something about the zip code. You can, in every one of our reports, you can see the mosaic segments. And this is what I was talking about earlier. The number 1 segment is the boomer group called Thriving Boomers, the E group, No Place Like Home. But the second one is from the Autumn Years group, Aging in Place. And the third one, and the fourth one, and the fifth one are singles. Are you seeing what I'm seeing? So you go from a boomer generation household to a seniors household to 3 groups of singles. If you don't think that's diversity, it's significant diversity. So here they are in graphic representation, just so you know, in every one of our reports. This is extremely important. You can download the e-handbook I'm going to show you in a minute. Right here, it's a PDF. It's a big one. If you haven't got it, it's about 300 pages. Take a little while, but it has all the information you need. There are 2 videos. One of them is, how do I understand what I'm looking at? And the other is, how do I use it for ministry? They're about 5 minutes or less, each of them. And then there is a mission impact guide by Tom Bandy that is specifically designed to assist churches in the use of this kind of information around ministry filters. And we're going to look at that. So here are the 300 data points. And I know you can't read all that. That's okay. I just wanted you to see the wheel, that there are all kinds of options, ethnicity, what kind of household, what's the property value, where do they work, their age, number of children, all of those pieces are a part of it. And what that does is allow Experian to create these 71 household types, starting with Group A and 6 different segments in Group A, Power Elite, Big Money, and going to Group S, Economic Challenges, which end with Tough Times. So if you look at some of these names, I mean, look at these names. Kids in Cabernet, A03, right? I love C12. The 12th wealthiest, C12, is golf cart and gourmet. Now, you know where they live? They live on a golf course. So, but what? The villages, yeah, and in Sarasota, and in places like that, and of course out probably in Arizona and some of the places. Yeah. If you see the picture, you'll understand right away. And then in every one of our Methodist churches, almost all of them, town elders live. Town elders are people generally over 75. They've been in church all their lives. They've been faithful to church, and most of our churches have numbers of those folks. And thankfully, because they've kind of kept things rolling along. So here's striving single scene. Here's one of the 71. This is 054. So if 1 is the most affluent and 71 is the least affluent, where do you see 54? Down towards the lower end of income, right? And estimated household income, a quarter of them have less than $15,000. These are not big money people. They're renters. They're 25 to 30-year-olds. They live in multi-family units, all right? And then look with me up here in the right-hand side of the screen where it says channel preferences. So I have a great strategy for you. I have a great strategy for you. Think of the number 100, because the number 100 is the norm. So as you read these communication channel preferences, these icons, look at the number underneath them, right? If 100 is the norm, here's what we should do. We should create a 4-color double-sided 5x7, slicker than heck, and send out 10,000 of them so we could reach Kyle and Brittany. The only problem is they score a 19 on direct mail and printed material. So we'd save ourselves some time and trouble by throwing them away. What would a church do to communicate with Kyle and Brittany? Text messages. That is right. Text message. You get the gold star. What else could you do? If you don't have a smartphone app for your church, even, I know you're small, but this is social media. They're going to, if they come, okay, there's more to that comment. If they come, and they probably won't come on Sunday morning, but if you get them engaged, they will be carrying their smartphone, and their Bible will be on their smartphone. And that's how they read it. Whether we think that's good or we don't think that's good is immaterial. And if they do come to church on Sunday, and you're preaching and you're the pastor, and they're holding the smartphone and you get upset about that, you don't understand. And it's time we get over that. I understand the dilemma, but those of us that have gray hair we didn't grow up like that, okay? But this is the culture it's embedded in them. It is who they are. If we hope to engage them, we need to understand that and be sensitive to that, and frankly, not judgmental. And I got to tell you right now, one of the things I'm experiencing in my own little church, in my own family even, is people believe they know who millennials are. And they say things like, well, you know, why should we have to do things for people that don't get out of their pajamas to come to McDonald's, you know, kind of thing. You got to stop that stuff. If you really want it, it's like the sermon said this morning, put your shoes on, right? And be loving people. You better have a relatively good website for your church that's more than just a calendar. Email is critical. They even watch broadcast television, and you could even podcast stuff. They're 2 times more likely than the average person for podcasts. They are technology savvy. Here's low technology, here's high technology, all right? And what this simply means is, if you're a technology novice, I love this kind of thinking. The novices are, average age is 55. Look what the novices do, you know. They're watching birds. I'm not sure how they know that, but they're bird watching and hunting and collecting plates. When you move to apprentices, now you're at age 48, and the income goes from $61,000 here to $94,000. Now they're a little more active. They're canoeing and kayaking and bicycling. And then when you move to journeyman, they get younger yet, 43. Average household income is 104. Now we're mountain and rock climbing. That's a long way from plate collecting. And then you move to wizards, it's the youngest group, and they're about average age, household income is about 80,000, and they're doing boxing and skateboarding and football and so on. So the life is very different from them. We look again at striving single scene, and one of the things we learn, this is the center line or the norm, and look here, when this moves to the right, it's an over-representation of that piece of information. You probably can't see the detail, but here's what it says. 59% of the striving single scene folks moved in the last year. 59%. And Kyle and Brittany, if they've moved in the last year, what are they looking for? What are they looking for? Well, they might move again, but if they've just moved, what are they looking for? What do you think they might be looking for? Relationships, what else? Place to go, things to do, fun, activities. They need to know what's going on in the community, all those things. Yes, that's right. So here's the mission impact guide I talked about earlier for striving single scene. 9 ministry filters. These people are looking for heroes of faith. Does that resonate with you? Do you understand when I say a hero of faith? That doesn't necessarily mean robes and stoles. It means a hero of faith. So it can mean robes and stoles. You'll see a piece like this. We don't have time to unpack all this. I just need to share a couple of things. They respect all religions and expect religions to tolerate one another, but they're not very committed to faith. They don't have experience in that. They're more likely to spend Christmas and Easter in a new Caribbean destination than in church. So church is foreign to them. Highest percentage of singles in the country before they move into settled relationships, married relationships, and so on. If they connect with the church, it will be strong. It may be liberal. It will be strong on social action, avoid evangelization. It will have to be cutting edge in technology. I understand that is difficult for small churches, but honestly, that's the reality. And so when you have the battle over the flat screen TV in the sanctuary, you may not have the capacity for this group. That's okay. Doesn't mean everybody has to do this, but it's part of what you have to understand. You'll see leadership preferences. They look for pastors who cast a large, inclusive, bold vision. You can see all of these as you go through hospitality. Listen to this. If they visit a church, they're accompanied by other participants in their midweek small group or outreach ministry. They come by personal invitation, are attracted by the vision or personality of the pastor. They are needing someone who is concerned about influencing the world because they want their lives to count for something and influence the world. Frankly, I do too. But especially that generation of folks really do. What kind of worship? We don't talk about traditional and contemporary worship anymore because it doesn't mean anything to people. It's so contextual. So take a look at that. People are going to ask, what does all this mean? And so there are definitions for the kinds of leaders, all right? There are definitions for hospitality. So if you talk about the basics of hospitality, friendly, untrained greeters, basic coffee and creamer, packaged food or sugary snacks. But if you talk about takeout, coffee to go, bagged food. See, I don't understand this, just so you know. It doesn't make sense to me because I didn't come up in this tradition, but apparently it works. A lot of times young singles, young individuals are really, they love to be able to pick up something and take with them. A lot of churches do that. That's not part of my DNA. But if we're going to do that kind of ministry, then we have to be serious about that sort of opportunity. So I'm going to move on. Now, the other thing is, and this is really important, there's a quick insight worksheet at the end of the quick insight report. I want to talk with you about this. I think this may be the best thing you can do with a small church just to get started. If you run the executive insight report for whatever geography you decide, I'd give this a try. You don't have to be more than 20 people in your church to be able to do something like this. So here is the theory behind this. Most congregations think they know their neighbor, their neighbors. It just kind of is. They kind of think they do. So one of the learnings is maybe we don't. Maybe we don't know. We think we sort of do, and they do know some things, of course. So here's what this workshop does. So let's say you have 20 people in your church, or 25. How many of you have less than 50 people in your church? A couple of you. All right, 2 or 3 of you. So if you have less than 50 people in your church, let's say you get a leadership meeting together, you got 20 people, whatever it is. So break that group of 20 into groups of 4, or 5. You can easily do that. What you do is you hand them out the Quick Insight worksheet, and this really is talking about describing the story of your ministry area, whatever you've selected. So here's what we ask people to do. You don't give them the demographic report, first of all. What you do is you hand them this sheet and ask them to answer the questions without talking to their neighbor. And I'll tell you, I've done this numbers of times, and the first thing that happens is they start to kind of grumble. Because when you ask them, you say, here's the ministry area we're looking at, a 5-mile radius around our church, whatever it is, you pick one. So they need to know what it is. How many people live there? Write it down. How many people? Is it going to grow or decline? By what percentage? 10%, 5%? They don't know. But you ask them to guess. So once that's done, then the second step is you're going to ask the group of no more than 5 people, maybe a piece of newsprint or something to record it on, whatever. Newsprint's kind of cool. That's old-fashioned, but it works pretty well in this kind of workshop. Have the group of 3 or 4 people talk about each one of those blanks and agree. You know how easy that is to get a group of 3 or 4 people to agree on is it growing and how many people are, but ask them to come to consensus. So now you've got 4 pieces of newsprint with all the answers of what they believe the community to be. Make sense? You're recording all of that. Then every group should share that with the whole room. So if you got 20 people in the room and you've got 4 groups, you're going to have 4 pieces of newsprint on the wall, and here's what's going to happen. None of them are going to look the same. And I'm telling you, I've done this dozens of times. It's fun. People laugh. They start kidding each other. They don't know how big it is. They don't know. But they're learning they don't know. And at that point, then, you distribute the quick insight report to everybody in the room. And you ask the question, are there any surprises? You thought it was growing at 1%, it's growing at 6%. You thought there was 3,000 people, there's 10? Or are there any confirmations of what you thought was true? Well, we thought this community was declining and we were right. And then you say, reflect on the story of the people from reading this report together in your small group. Are there 3 significant life concerns? What are they? And they might be something like, our community has a growing number of affluent retirement age families. They could be opportunity for senior ministries and leisure issues, including travel. Anyway, you list the life concerns together in your group. What are the ways our congregation is like the people of the study area? And name the ways, if there are some. And then, if there are some, what are the present ministries that we have that might work? And if we have some that might work, how could we strengthen those? Is this making sense to you? And what about if our congregation is different from the study area that we're looking at? How are we different? Well, our average age is 65 and the community's age is 35. All right. What might be 2 potential new missions ministries that might engage the people in our study area? And given the discoveries, what do we need to do to make that happen? You can do this in less than 2 hours, and you will come away with a better understanding of your church area, for sure. Now that may lead to some other steps, I don't know, possibly. Make sense? The Executive Insight Report, any questions? The Executive Insight Report I talked about earlier, it has the themes and the data. It also has graphics. So you've got opportunity to both see the graphics and the numbers for people that like both. I think looking at the racial ethnic income is really important. And so there's also generational information that you really need to understand about your ministry area. That is critical. If you don't know about the generational types, if you don't know what millennials are and Gen Xers or boomers, and you may not, you can click that link and it will tell you who they are. You can read about them. And look at what's true for this area. I'm a boomer. Look at what's happening to the boomers. They're not going up. Look at the largest group, millennials. And the second largest group is Gen Xers. This is not to be avoided. And so then, look at the pie. 31% are millennials. And 27% are Gen Xers. That's who they are. That's who's out there. And then there's an Executive Insight worksheet if you want to use that, that is a little more individual kind of looking and reflecting. You could do it on a committee, but it's not a group process sort of thing. I want to talk with you about Ministry Insight report. I think this is really important. So we've done the same thing. We've just used the Ministry Insight report for life concerns and so on. This is the real church that I'm a part of. And so, number 1, facing the future, savings and retirement. Number 3, day-to-day financial matters. People in this community are concerned about their future and their financial future. What could the church do? Financial Peace University. Is there a CPA related to your church that's got personality that could do a workshop on how to, maybe an investment person, and invite the community now? I mean, but how does the church do mission related to the life concerns that are here? Reaching my goals, being successful, all those pieces. The top 10 reasons out of 21 that people outside the church are not coming. Number 1 is religious people, religious people are too judgmental. Number 2 is religion is too focused on money. People inside the church that are thinking of leaving. Why? Religious people too judgmental. Move from community, which makes me feel a little better. But look at number 3. Don't believe in God? How is it that in our churches we have people saying they don't believe in God? What's going on? I mean, that just stuns me, friends. We're getting near our time, and if you don't hear anything else I've said, I want you to hear very carefully what I'm saying now, because I think this is the bottom line for the church in the future. When we did a survey nationally, we asked about 30 questions that they could select from church program preferences. And across the country, everywhere in the United States, everywhere, the number 1 answer was warm and friendly encounters. It was ahead of sermons. It was ahead of music. It was ahead of programs of any sort. What does that mean? It means that you may be the best preacher in the world. You may have a killer music program. You may be the friendliest church, self-determined, in the world, because every church I've ever been in is the friendliest church ever. Here's the killer. If you don't make ways that are new, for newcomers and guests to connect with others, they will not stay. You may get 1 or 2 here and there, but overall, new people and guests need new groups. And in my little church, here's what I'm hearing. We got groups. We got them. We got them. We're friendly. We're nice people. We welcome everybody. So they come to the Sunday school class, nice people. And someone says, yeah, we're so glad you're here. You know, I've been in this church 28 years. I've heard those exact words said. What does that do? Immediately, hey, I'm not here. I'm not in this group. This isn't who I am. It's not about me. We've got to stop being in denial about this. And I don't care whether you're a small church, big church, middle-sized church. I experience across this country, this is the barrier to what's happening and why we're not connecting with people. We're not starting opportunities for people to connect. And it's an intentional reality that has to happen. And you have to ask yourself the question, is it a church for us or a church for others? And if it's a church for us, you've got limited lifespan. That's it. That's it. We have a very nice, wonderful church. I love these people. They're just really nice. And they're missional, and they go and serve, but they don't know their neighbors. And so I'm about to go knock on some doors. And not everybody can do that, but there are people who are called by God to do that. There are people. I do not believe that God puts a church in place and says, okay, there are no spiritual gifts here for you to go talk to people. There are no gifts. That's not biblical, friends. There are gifts.
That's right. You got at least one.
There is someone. There are someones. And frankly, you know, here's what needs to happen. When I go knock on that door, I need to know what the mission of the church is. And I need to know why God's calling me to go knock on the door. So I'm going to tell a story like, hey, you know why I'm here? Because I'm part of Epworth United Methodist Church, and we just want to meet friends in the community. That's why I'm standing on your porch. I just want you to know we love this community and we love our neighbors, and I want to introduce myself to you. And maybe we're going to have some coffee, one of the houses in the neighborhood here. Love to have you join us. We just want to get to know our neighbors. We don't have to have them in blood. You just start making relationships with people. Why do we make it so hard? Sorry, I don't mean to preach, but that's kind of what it is. It's what it is. It's what it is. I'm going to show you this one last thing. I got to show you travel polygons. So this is really great. You can use this in your small church, travel polygons. You can actually go to the map itself. This is now moving into kind of 201. You go to the map and you say, look, I'd like to draw a shape. And when you click on shapes, there's an opportunity to select travel polygons. And when you go to travel polygons, you can say, I want drive time or walk time or bicycle time. I'm going to do walk time, and I'm going to click a point on the map, which is the church icon. I'm going to click next, he hopes. And then I'm going to say, I want a 10-minute walk time, a 15-minute walk time, a 20-minute walk time. If you're in the middle of the country, you can do a 5-minute drive, 10-minute drive, 15-minute drive, whatever it is. And I want to know whether it's high resolution, medium. If you do a high resolution, it's going to have 48,000 points that look like roots in a tree. If you do medium, it's a little bit more angular. And click draw, and you get this kind of result, where you can see 3 different shapes. One is a 10-minute walk time, the small one. The green is a 15, and the kind of purple is a 20. You can select any of them for a report if you'd like to. And then, once you have an area selected, then you can do a demographic report on it. You can even do a custom report if you like, or the predefined. I'm going to do a custom report. I'm going to build a report. I'm going to select what I want from the custom report, and I want to know about families with children. That's all I'm doing is selecting it, and then I get the numbers. It says, here it is. I generate the report down below, just a couple of steps, and my goodness, there are 396 families with children in that little drive time, and 193 of them are single females. So that's kind of remarkable. 193 single females. I want to show you the plotting of this congregation. This is our church. I want you to see it, what it looks like. It's hard to do this in an hour. I'm going to plot the people. I just want you to see. I'm going to go faster because we're done with time and I know you're tired. So I just want you to see what their end result is. I want you to see what it looks like. So here we are. My apologies for so much material in a... So now we have the little dots on the map. This represents where the church is. These are all individual households, right? There's 207 of them plotted. You can kind of see where they cluster together. You can see the little neighborhoods of people when you plot your people. There's kind of the center point of our church where there's a cluster of people, but there's other little neighborhoods of ministry around the church. And so we can get 93% in 109 square miles or 48% in 8.9 square miles. And that's how you begin to develop ministry areas, when you can see what the strategic areas are. You can do the same thing for your church. It's not hard. They made a mistake. Did you notice it said 207? You know what that meant? They uploaded the membership. We have 100 in church. They should have had 100 plots, not 207. 207 represents the membership households. That is not real. I hope it's been helpful. You have questions? You have questions?
Is that something easy to print, a map even?
Oh, sure. Oh, yeah, sure. You can export the map. Yeah, easily. Sure.
Printing the reports is not hard.
Yeah, you can run a comparative insight report for that geography like I looked at before. You can do that with one click. If you want to do an exported map, you can do that. Look, here's what I'll say to you. I've got cards here. I get up in the morning not about demographic reports, but about mission and ministry to people. If one of you in this room wants to do this and you need some assistance, there is a video, by the way, for how to upload your people. So that'll teach you how to do that. You call us and we'll help you get it done and help you with the end result, getting it out. I mean, we'll do that. I'll do a webinar with you, whatever we got to do. Because I want something to happen positive as a result of what you've done here. Okay? My cards are here. If there are other questions, I'll stay. If not, I bet you're ready to go. All right. Thank you very much.